I think everybody's kind of familiar with, at least generally familiar, maybe not Tracy, Ted, I don't know what your level is with Fork Farm. So about 7 years ago, I met a guy locally named Alex Tyank, who is an inventor of this machine, which he'd been working at Goodwill, and then ended up working at Feeding America, and kind of in the background was working on this project that he had started in Brooklyn to kind of make a more efficient growing system. And so, so when we kind of met up about 7 years ago, we were kind of looking at some issues around, IP protection, various other things. But my general view that that kind of watching the environmental swings, and just kind of looking at the economics, basically all the leafy greens in the United States are grown in two areas. One being Salinas Valley, California, and the second being Yuma, Arizona, for counter-seasonal production when it's not available to grow greens in Salinas Valley when it's typically when it's too cold. And so the problem is that every year, basically since at least I've been involved in the company, there have been huge supply chain disruptions with those pieces. And so my kind of early observation was that this sort of centralized efficiency of supply chains, has these advantages until you experience a disruption, which a lot of people were talking about even before COVID, but then COVID just brought squarely into focus. And then just the series of kind of just supply chain disruptions that we've seen ever since. And so dovetailing off of what Tracy said, this kind of notion that we needed to create a more, that we really needed to decentralize the model as far as possible, to the growing of food was kind of critical to that, in part because of all the wasted food miles and the ton of food waste. In fact, when most of the lettuce that's shipped in has about and is expected, at least in a standard grocery store, JD I'm sure does way better than this, but standard grocery store expects 3 or 4 days of life out of their greens by the time they get in the store, and then they basically throw the rest away. So you're paying a huge amount for all that waste. But Alex and I kind of knew that in order to make it work, that it had to get to kind of commercial efficiency levels. And so ultimately we got down to this, this version of the machine. And then really there's also, and it's kind of in soft launch right now, but basically an industrial version of the machine, which is modular and scalable and easily plugs in kind of in the same way that we're talking about generativity. So the idea being, we have all this wasted real estate. We want to be able to put a commercial farm in that wasted real estate. But nobody wants to have to do all of the build out and time and whatever in order to get to that level of efficiency and scale. And so we're just basically releasing a product that has effectively all of the HVAC and, effectively an integrated heat pump, the water, the tank systems, whatever, all the other stuff that you need to control essentially the humidity and temperature of a room, on basically a skid, and then it just connects to your water and power supplies from there. And so you effectively can create a modular growing space with these racks in any environment. So kind of our early model, obviously, where we've really hit is in schools, people who want to grow at a certain scale and be able to grow. And with 16 or 30 of these units, you can grow enough food to feed a school district. And there's a lot of now really good case studies if you follow us on any social media. But there's a really amazing one from Riverside, California, that talks about how they've replaced basically all the outsourced purchasing of food by just growing the food internally there. And so I think all of this is to say that the economics has to work. And so the model has to get under the cost of whatever, the real cost, not just maybe the dollar cost, but really layering in perhaps, some of the environmental and other factors. It gets even more expensive. But we felt we had to compete at basically the commodity cost. So our product can produce, a pound of lettuce cheaper than you can buy it, than you can grow it in Salinas Valley, California at this point in time, and get it to market. Basically under $1 a pound. And so that's one of the keys to the model, is you basically have to achieve an efficiency that works at, that achieves or beats the commodity scale, but provides a superior product with shelf life and time. So that's really what we've been aiming toward and working on. And I don't want to sound like a fork infomercial. I literally almost never do this or even talk about fork. But it really is important because it really is important because I think this is just such a huge problem, and the likelihood of continued disruption of these supply chains, the lack of ability to feed people, the lack of ability to get fresh greens into food deserts. These are all things that we have to figure out how to solve, and so that's really trying to get it down to the point that it's modular and stupid simple, so that anyone can do it and participate in the process with like a minimum amount of intervention and potentially just fully automated down the chain. So I don't know, that was a lot to download, and I can whatever talk about more. I'll just stop there. So,
John, can you do mobile U-Pick?
Like where you
Wouldn't that be a blast? Your truck could roll up and you can come pick your own.
We've thought about that, and I think there's a way. The only problem is that, like, to get the efficiency at scale, you really want to be able to like grow it all to optimal size and weight and pull it all at one time at optimal size and weight and get it to market at optimal time and at that point in time. So yes, I think there's a way to do it, but there's a lot of systems that try to like sell you on that, but like in the background, there's all these people who are just like making it look pretty instead of it being a really efficient system. And so like, so yes, you could probably build out that system, but more often, on day 28, when you have 30 pounds of lettuce in that, in that machine, you're like, okay, like I need to get this out of here. So, it's more our kind of intro, the product that we mostly sell or that sold a lot of is more than really even like a family of 4 or 6 can eat in a month. And so it's not really optimized for human scale, although I see, Tracy, kind of to your point, like I see this potentially as like, why isn't this just a utility that I just like have like food that grows in my house, right? And maybe, right now it's, easy enough to do with like something like agroponics. But in the future, maybe like, who knows, like you could potentially grow food on site or whatever, like grow, cultured food on site or other things like, we don't know where technology could potentially take us, and how we might adapt those systems to be even further decentralized away from under $1 a pound. I don't know exactly. Like I can get you the exact unit economics when we have.
Does that include the cost of buying the equipment and stuff as part of that, or is it the?
John, so do you mind?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Do you mind if I interject for a second?
Yeah.
So,
please.
So we, with the grocery store model, we've typically across the board run about a 6% shrink, and that's with even trying to go as local as possible, having the longer shelf life. We've been working with Forks Farms we have an extra lease space that's attached to our building that we're trying to vet out for this, to bring in 24 units from them to help get the longevity out of that. And with that is, you are correct, John, it is the pound reference that you were saying. And we actually went through the numbers. It's a huge cost saving for us to actually doing this process, being able to do it ourselves, because how the cycle was working and how they're suggesting for us, it's they're running on 4 separate cycles. So it's 4 weeks long for the period for us of growing it, but each week we're able to go ahead and cultivate ourselves. So being able to supply it as fresh as possible on our shelves and having about a 24-day shelf life, which is huge because even local purveyors, we're only getting about a 6-day out of that.
Cool.
So think of the cost savings on that from a complete aspect, especially when you're doing it from a supply from a grocery, or if you're doing it to a hospital or school or anything like that.
So and it's it's not organic because we don't make that claim, but effectively you're growing it in nutrient water and like exactly who's handling it. if it's literally next door, you can't have any more local than that. So it's just so I'm totally down with the grow food more locally and figure out how we do this approach. But I get to the unit economics.
I think
Cool. I mean, so the answer is yes. Can I grow it? Yes. Like, where do the unit economics work? Leafy greens, right? And to some extent, herbs and other special, specialty type things like that, where you might be able to get, the unit economics to work, right?
Fast turn thing.
You generally want something that's like, the more turns you can get, obviously the quicker the return. And so that's why we are able to get pretty good like a pretty fast payback period on it, which it's usually, I want to say it's like 15 months to basically pay back the cost of the unit. And that's because you're able to do so many turns. If, as JD said, you get your starts going ahead of, you're kind of running your starts in tandem, and then you're basically transplanting them into the machine, and then you basically it's kind of like turbocharging them. You grow them very fast, and you basically pull it, get it cleaned very quickly, and then put in your next, kind of crop cycle. So the faster you turn your cycles, makes a huge difference, because the more crops you can turn in a year, then typically it does better economically.
So we worked partly with Forks Farms on that, and then not just the energy portion on it, the water, anything that would go into for the utilities. We also know that it would take an employee about 8 hours one shift of 8 hours a week, plus a couple of maintenance throughout the week. So not even a total of 12 hours total for us in order to supply it. And that's for the 24 units that we are looking at. And across the board, the cost on it is small compared to what we would actually get back from the benefit of it.
We have grown a lot of different varietals of greens, and there's, obviously some are more prolific producers than others. It just depends on the genetics. And some like the environment a little bit better than others. But generally speaking, you can grow just about any green, all the Japanese greens people have done. We do a Japanese mix now, and various other things. So we actually are in the because this is just part of our broader business model, because we're also, we've taken venture funding and so on the kind of, whatever the venture trajectory. But part of the business model that we built out is around providing these custom seed packs that are different for different varieties. So there's a lot of things you can grow. You can grow cherry tomatoes, you can grow peppers, you can grow strawberries. Some are more finicky than others, because strawberries want a cool cycle, so you have to figure out how to refrigerate your unit. So it's all potentially doable. Bok choy loves this machine. It just grows like a weed. I agree, and I really don't. I don't see them as I don't see them as being different, because there's obviously just things that are never going to be more efficient to grow, or at least now we can't imagine them being more efficient to grow in a machine or by robots than with than with people and in land. But we should save it for then the crops that really need to be grown there, and in the places that where those things grow that are special, that you really need that that resource. I think we can get more efficient about how we use our land, and particularly, in light of just how awful the monocrops are, and how just generally bad they are for the environment and for the pollinators, and for there's just also so, and that's getting beyond the employee impact, but yeah.
The North Hollywood project was funded out of ARA money, stimulus money. It was undocumented workers on a job site, so that's where they would go to get construction jobs, and it was free land that was actually owned by the Department of Water and Power in Los Angeles. But there was this job site there, and they were growing food already. And so we got the grant money and said, well, do you want to? They were just growing it for fun, because most of them were Mexican farmers, farmers who grew food large scale in Mexico. And there was this it was about an acre total, and they were growing food. And we said, well, do you want to do this for money, to make, to supplement your income? And they said, yeah. And so we adapted the CSA model, which was a B2B model that we did in Detroit with Menlo, where the local farmers were selling produce to the employees of DTE. So it was like a, captive audience with, organic forms of marketing occurring. And we did that to Pratt with Pratt Whitney Rocketdyne in North Hollywood. What happened was really cool is that one, it was a circle without an edge, so everybody was invited to participate. We didn't form a legal cooperative, but we didn't need to because they all operated that way naturally. So profits were distributed based on hours worked, and the hours were variable according to the time that they had, which was really cool. We evolved the system, so we grew sort of on demand for what the employees at Pratt Whitney Rocketdyne wanted for the CSA, and expanded it, and we adapted our growing cycles based on their preferences and volume. Like we always had way too much lettuce, and it was picked fresh, and it would last for 2 weeks in the fridge, and they're like, no more lettuce next week. And so we had to stop it with the lettuce, and then they wanted other cool stuff, and then we had surprise things. And the most beautiful part about it, we delivered once a week to the employees at Rocketdyne, was that they would all run out. It was like the high point of their week was to come see the farmers. And the farmers were so proud, and they were so happy. And then we did events with them on this, horrid job center site under the DWP power lines in NoHo that became this Eden. And then it evolved somehow, and I'm not really sure how it happened, but there were a lot of gang kids in the neighborhood and kids who wanted to get out of the gang thing, and they started coming around and they started hanging out with the farmers. And then this sort of informal but very serious and rigorous kind of big brother thing started happening. And then we expanded out to another site where there was a youth program, and we started, and the farmers went over there and taught the kids how to do it. We taught them permaculture, and so it just kept expanding on itself. They got so good, it was biointensive succession planning. So we served 50 customers off of a quarter of an acre every week. And they had it down to a science. We developed training material. We taught them how to do that because they were used to growing on big land and, monocropping. So it was multiple biointensive and companion planting and all of that stuff. And then they got so good at it, we had enough surplus to then sell to the farm markets and then to expand the farm. So that's kind of story. I don't know if there are other dimensions that you wanted to hear about, Jason, but that was it. But the social dimension was amazing to witness. It was a beautiful thing.
I got to visit it once, which was cool. And
yeah.
So at least now I know where you lived, Ted. And the other thing was just that you were able to, if I remember, you were able to figure out how to feed a family of 4 for a week for a certain amount of money or something like that at the time. That's what I recall.
It was enough produce for a family of 4 for $15 a week. So it was all of their produce. We were starting to expand into fruit. We didn't have all the fruits covered, but and another related thing under DWP lines, they put in orchards at the time. I don't know what's happened with that, but we got all these free fruit trees. So we planted loads of fruit trees. They take a few years to develop. Was really though, and this was the learning confidence. They wanted me to stay, and I stayed on like for 2 years after the grant ran out, just because they were my friends. But then I moved, and they had the knowledge, they had access to free land to expand the farms, but they could never summon the courage to do it. It's interesting. So the governance leadership thing of these systems depends on the population. I mean, these guys were so collaborative. They didn't have that problem. Like the farmers where I live now
it does take a lot of planning with them and kind of giving them true numbers of realistically what we're going to go through on not just a week to week, but full season for them, so they know what to grow and how to support us, so we can try and stay as local as possible on that. But again, each community is going to be different because it is going to be very dependent on the buying habits of who's coming into your store.
And the culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is more on the educational side for it. So, and kind of a little aside from the co-op, although I do it there as well. This is way pre-pandemic, had been working with the Appleton area school district to work with low-income families, teaching them how to make a healthy, nutritious meal that's under 30 minutes, that gets kids involved into it, where they're able to feed a family of 4 while purchasing the products for under $10, and then really giving them the education aspect of it, of how to prepare those healthy, nutritious foods. And it started in Edison Elementary, grew into all 9 of the elementary schools, where we were going in there and working with these families to help support it. That was all based off of funding and stuff that we were able to do to support it. But being able to actually train not just kids, but even the parents, where their broccoli comes from, what broccoli is, how to prepare it correctly, and get them to actually try it, versus the sad part where most of those families, if they're not able to prepare it themselves because they are constrained on time and dollars, they're going and getting like the unhealthy processed fast food, you name it. And this was to try and combat that, and something that's proven to be very successful. Since being at the co-op, I've actually taken the same model, and we do it there. We partner with the YMCA in Oshkosh to bring in the same type of families to help work them, educate them. And then I also help show them how to shop the co-op while on a budget, so they actually know where that food's coming from, how to get the healthy, nutritious food, and get the educational aspect from it as well. So all parts that can easily be part of a model like this.
And I'm thinking